everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so please consider us PG-13. Today, your hosts are John Schmidt and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 206, our indie publisher focus on the Queen of Swords Press. Welcome back, Catherine Lindoff.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me back.
Well, it's a delight. You came with us last time to talk about your work with Silver Moon and Blood Moon, but today, given all the interesting things going on in the world, I really wanted to come back and talk a lot more about the Queen of Swords Press and what it is to run an independent press. And wow, I've got such a long list of questions, so I hope you're ready with millions of brilliant answers for me.
I'm ready.
Well, I like the way you described it on the website. If you don't mind, I'll read it. The Queen of Swords is an independent small press specializing in swashbuckling tales of daring do, my personal favorite, bold new adventures in time and space, mysterious stories of the occult and arcane, and fantastical tales of people and lands far and near. I love that description with all of my heart. I remember when you guys first had Sinrak come up and I was able to buy a book for friends about a lesbian capybara pirate princess.
Pirate captain.
Pirate captain princess. It just makes me so happy to say out loud, I can't even, you know?
Yeah, there is no princess in there.
All capybaras are princesses to us.
All capybaras are princesses.
She is, however, dapper, which is also critical.
If I can have a memory of Kevin Kline dancing and singing I Am the Pirate King in my head, then Sinrak can dance around and say I am the pirate princess.
Although that's not canonical Gilbert and Sullivan, so we'll just fire anyone who disagrees with us out of a cannon, because this is Buckling Swashes. This is grand fantasy. How did you exactly come about to start a press?
I was published by other presses for a number of years. I'm actually that rarest of all things. I am a New York publishing baby. My mother was one of the founders of the American Society of Picture Professionals, which was, I think it still exists in some form, but it's the professional organization for people who did photo research and the kind of work that she did.
That's super cool. I mean, is this an occupation that even exists anymore, or?
It's in different forms, I think.
Right.
It doesn't look like it did when she was doing it. There wasn't a whole lot of childcare. She's a single mom. You know, I either stayed with my grandmother and her sister, or I hung out with mom, which meant a lot of the time going to the office, which was Harcourt, Brace and Yovanovitch, or St. Martin's, or, you know, any of the other different places that she was working. So I actually kind of grew up in New York publishing. I didn't start writing until I was in my early 30s. I didn't write fiction until I was in my early 30s. And then I started writing short stories. I also did some independent journalism. And from there, I ramped up working with a couple of different publishers, had a bunch of short stories out, did a couple of collections, edited and co-edited a couple of anthologies, put out my first novel with another press. And between various things, issues that I was having with the publisher I had at the time, and narrowly dodging the opportunity to sign a 3-book contract with Alora's Cave. So I did not go down with the ship on that one because I had a lawyer take a look at it. She was like, yeah, no, don't sign that. Anyway, so the gist of it was that we kind of moved into about 2015 or so. And I thought, you know, I cannot possibly be more dysfunctional than some of the people I've been working with, which is usually true.
I can do better than them is a noble reason to go into almost any job. And I entirely support that. You are not the first person who's mentioned having problems with their independent publishers. And there can be pitfalls. There can be, I think you are wise to have engaged a lawyer sooner rather than later. And there's some people out there that say they will happily look at your signing contract, but give us, you know, two types of shenanigans that can go out there with independent presses.
Well, we'll pick the lawyer situation because it's an easy one. So Alora's Cave was one of the bigger romance publishers for the, you know, kind of mid-tier folks. They'd successfully made the jump from the internet to then Borders book. Were doing quite well. And at the time I was writing primarily on erotic romance. So I was a recognizable name. I won awards, all that good stuff. I was in a lot of best of. So they approached me about the contract, a contractual arrangement for three books. As I said, had a lawyer take a look at it. And amongst the things in the contract were, now bear in mind that I have day jobs in IT.
Right.
And the non-disclosure clause in this thing was so restrictive. You not only couldn't say anything bad about them, you couldn't say anything good about them either.
Weird.
There were a whole bunch of other things about it that were in retrospect pretty, off. And the reason I'd had a lawyer look at it was up until that point, most of my contracts had been a page, or it was 15 pages long. And I kind of glanced through it and went, I need another opinion. So she called me up and said, no, honey, don't sign that. That's actually a quote.
I mean, I just now have in my head the quote, the first rule of Alora's Cave is we don't talk about Alora's Cave.
we don't talk about Alora's until. So I went back to them, tried to negotiate some of the more problematic clauses. They said, nope. And I'm like, well, you came to talk to me. I didn't show up at your door, cap in hand, begging to be published. So whatever. It was still hard. I mean, it was still hard to walk away from a 3-book contract with what was then a successful publisher. Well, about 6 months later, it turned out that there were a bunch of people that they hadn't paid and a bunch of people whose rights they'd ripped off and a bunch of bills that hadn't been getting paid. And the whole Borders collapse, really accelerated the existing problems. And they blew up really spectacularly with many lawsuits and bankruptcy, and a lot of people who had multi-book contracts with them saw those books get tied up in the bankruptcy. So I dodged that bullet, and really, to this day, I thank that lawyer profusely. She retired shortly after I talked to her, but in my head, I'm still thanking her.
I think it brings an interesting single question up. Who do you give rights to? I mean, I've sold a bunch of short stories, and normally it's like, we just want first publishing right. And I always think that's perfectly reasonable. You can have first publishing right. Sounds like you're the voice of beware if they say sole publishing right.
Yeah, you always want to look at things like that. There's things like writing, media tie-ins, for example, where you're not going to own that story after you finished it because it's in their world, it's their characters, it's their world building, et cetera, et cetera. So I do some media tie-in work too. So that's why that is relevant to this conversation. You don't want a publisher that, is claiming copyright over your work because that belongs to you. If they are trying to get copyright to your work, then they best be paying you for it, and then you can negotiate it from there. But it's something to kind of think about vetting contracts and so forth. So basically, I would be super wary about extremely restrictive non-disclosure clauses, because that usually means somebody's got something to hide. What happens the most with small presses, honestly, especially for book length work, people for a variety of reasons end up closing up shop really abruptly. And sometimes that can leave your work in limbo. So you always want to write a reversion if they close. Somebody dies, which happens more often than you'd think. So you get people who go into it, they're all excited about it, and then the crushing reality sets in. They decide it isn't what they want to do, or something happens, somebody gets sick, something goes sideways in some way, and they can't sustain it. And sometimes they don't handle that part of it very well. That happens a lot.
I was going to say, what does an indie press offer these days in terms of services? I mean, I have friends that publish, in Bain and Tor and some of the big names. We're not going to say S&S because we don't like them today. Or I'm sorry, that's a personal thing. Other people like Simon & Schuster. But what is the difference? I mean, they offer a lot, although in varying degrees of marketing, depending on how important you are already. But what does an indie press offer in terms of services for a potential author? Tell us about, if you said, hey, John, I'm going to publish your story of your gay cowboys ranging the West. I'm going to put it in. What does an indie publisher offer an author that they can't get from a big house?
I would say that my authors get from me is my level of hustle, which is sort of insane. But I find cover artists, I commission the cover art, I make sure edits get done, I make sure that contributors' copies are there, I get things submitted for awards, I solicit reviews, I do a crap ton of book-related events. I mean, a lot. Usually a couple of things going every single month. I help my authors get into things. I just nominated one of our authors, Michael Merriam's novella that we published earlier this year, Tierra de Cobre. I just nominated him for the Small Spec Book Awards, and they're working with a couple of different folks who have influencer platforms. And so one of them is doing a profile of him. in which she's also going to talk about some of his indie published work. So that's an example of something that he would have had a harder time getting on his own. Not impossible, but he would have had to know about it and followed through on it and so forth. And in this case, I'm able to do that for him to get that set up so that he can get this extra publicity, not only for the books that he has with us, but for his other work as well. So that's one example. There's things, we have a local Twin Cities Book Festival. We table at it every single year. I'm able to get, if I have local authors that year, I'm able to often get them a reading on the main stage. It's completely ruled out to authors who are indie published, but it's harder. And then you've got the cachet of coming in with a press that's a known quantity. And that's also part of it, is that there are people who come back and shop our catalog regularly because they like my taste. And they think if they liked book X, they're probably going to like this other book. If I say that it's like this, these two are comparable, people are more inclined to pick that up. So you've got, and what is it, 8 years of me honing sales techniques at tables and events and so forth. And it's hard to keep up with that. Unless you're very outgoing and you're very committed to doing all of that footwork yourself, it's very difficult to make the same kind of splash as an indie author. Now, does every small person?
As I say, I can really see that. We had, I worked for marketing in B2B IT technology and security, and as much as we want to say, oh yeah, our website, oh yeah, our SEO and all of these things, live events were where we always got the majority of our leads. So is that where you see the majority of your sales? Is it more live or is it more online these days?
Our in-person events are the bulk of our sales. Our online sales are, as with everyone else, we go broad. So we're on Amazon, but we're also on Draft2Digital. We're on, iTunes and Kobo and international platforms and anywhere else I can get books in, including some of the smaller indie ones like Drive-Thru-Fiction. Cumulatively, our ebook sales are higher than our print sales. But our print sales, the majority of them, we get some things to libraries and we get some things to bookstores and individuals and so forth. But the majority of our print sales come through direct sales off our website or at event table.
Wow. And you are the person, having just gone through doing EPUB versus Mobi, are you the person that actually does all of those individual layouts? Because if I was wearing a hat, I would sweep it off. That's a lot of work.
I do the ebook formatting. I have a program that does it, and it's great. It's marvelous. I use it for all the ebooks. For print, up until recently, we had a wonderful, wonderful book designer who also did a number of our covers, and she would often do the interiors if I had another artist doing the cover. And just Terry Roy did terrific work. Terry had to retire at the end of last year due to health issues. Michael's novella, the Tierra de Cobra, The Weird West, we put out in March, is the first one where I did my own print interior. I would not do my own covers because it would look like a 5-year-old with Photoshop did them. It would be a terrible thing. The interior I managed to kind of get through with minor errors, so I feel pretty pleased about that. But Terry did spectacular interiors, and for the other books we're putting out right now, we're doing new editions of Melissa Scott and Lisa Barnett's Astraint series. So Point of Hopes, Point of Knives, Point of Dreams, all of those books. And we're working with an English artist named Matt Bright, who has a company called Inkspell. And he's done absolutely gorgeous interiors for these and gorgeous covers. So we're definitely hoping to work with him again on future projects. There's also there's a cover artist up in Canada who a number of times Canaxa Design, Natalie Gray, who does just marvelous work. So as that kind of stuff, I try to outsource. What we do internally is, I do the basic formatting. We do the edits. We do the copy editing. I get the ISBNs for things. I set the prices. I get everything out on the ebook platforms. I get stuff out to the Library of Congress so we can get LCCN numbers, all of that kind of good stuff I take care of.
Quick question for you. Mm-hmm. And oh my God, that's a lot of service. How do you find your authors?
That is a good question. Up until 2023, we were occasionally doing open calls for manuscripts. In 2023, my wife's dementia began to become noticeably worse. And at the beginning of this year, I had to put her in memory care. And then I just had to put her in hospice. That was a couple of weeks ago now.
Big hugs.
So sorry.
Thank you. But what that's meant is that I have a limited amount of energy. So we were trying, for example, to put out all of the Estranged books this year. It's our 7th year of existence. So while working full time, while still dealing with, caregiving issues with my wife. So both Melissa Scott and I both had COVID, all switched jobs. There were a couple of big moves in there. It just, we're going to put out the new book early next year. We were hoping to get pack all that into 1 year, which was like, yeah. So the things that impacts.
I've been backing up then. I wanted to connect two idea questions there. You mentioned all of the ebooks that you do and that you set them up for print. Do you still work then through the larger brick and mortar stores? Like, I know that B. Dalton does exist in some places. I keep seeing it, and the Borderlands I sometimes see. And
Borderlands is different from Borders. Borders.
Borders, yeah.
Sorry.
When I say I'm setting things up for distribution through Drafted Digital, and Amazon. I do those separately because of various shenanigans on the and the print stuff all goes out through Ingram Spark, which is print on demand. This is pretty common with most indie publishers. However, Ingram takes enough of a cut that our books are not, we don't send them out returnable, which means that a lot of bookstores won't pick them up. So we have some separate arrangements with bookstores like Dreamhaven Books, which is a marvelous, marvelous bookstore here in Minneapolis, is a mile away from my house. And when we put out new books, Greg just buys them out on the shelf, and I do events for them, try to keep people coming in and checking things out. Majors and Quinn, which is another great local bookstore, also carries our books. There's a bookstore out in Maryland that carries our books. So we do make some independent arrangements with it. Otherwise, bookstores can get our books through Ingram, or all our books are also out on Bookshop. So any bookstore that has a Bookshop page can also get our titles as well, because they're all out there. So to go back to the author selection thing, anyway, so the gist of it was that I had to put open calls on the back burner. So we've been kind of riding along on invites for the past, year and change, and probably will have to do so for a while longer.
You answered that question beautifully. But in the interest of getting my question out before we run out of time, I have the inverse of that question. What book or book series would you recommend to someone who's open-minded but unfamiliar with your book catalog as a good place to start? And obviously the answer can change, but I want to read something. Give me a rec.
Okay.
Death of the Dionysus Club.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of reading experience you're looking for. Estranged, which is the first book of that, is Point of Hope's terrific novel. It's a fantastical mystery with gay protagonists set in an alternate Renaissance city, where the protagonists are not magic users, but they are crime solving. I would say that if you are a fan of, say, KJ Charles, you might like those. Even more so, in kind of that same vein, Death by Silver and Death at the Dionysus Club are Melissa's books co-written with Amy Griswold, and they are gay Victorian and murder mysteries where they solve crimes with magic. Mm-hmm. Our best-selling books are actually mine, but not by very much. Melissa and AJ are coming up on me pretty fast here. But I have a series, duology, Blood Moon and Silver Moon, that are about a pack of menopausal werewolves set in a mythical Western city, and they're very popular. Just audio rights got picked up last year by Tantor. I've been approached by a film studio about film rights. I don't think anything is going to come of it, but at least people are asking.
I would just like to state that for a number of us that are hitting the menopausal age of being a werewolf, we are enjoying the whole concept of people our own age in terms of representation also. I mean, they don't all have to be fresh-faced 20. Oh my goodness, you're secretly this. Give us more menopausal women out there in fiction, people. So that's why I love your books.
Thank you.
That sounds like the one I'm going to go for, actually.
Okay. All right. Silver Moon's the first one. The other possibilities, just want to mention, The Voyages of Sense the Dapper, which you may actually have in your household right now, is just the absolute best comfort read. It's a, of a book. Little capybara arms come out and give you a big, science fiction. Obviously, Aliens is by literary agent Jenny Goloboy, and it's a road trips gone horribly awry, alien invasion goes sideways, talking corgis from outer space kind of book.
Well,
as they all should be.
wait, we were prepared for corgis in space from the time that we all watched Cowboy Bebop's out there. So I'm just saying, corgis are always going to win points with your readers.
I have done tables with Jenny, and she's very outgoing, and so I have known her to stand out of the street at festivals yelling, "Hey, you with the corgi, over here, we got a book for you."
Well,
Direct sales
first you
work.
got to get people's attention,
Yep. She's not shy. It's very helpful.
If somebody out there were to say, okay, I give up, I've been trying to do this for a while, but I'm really passionate about that, would you recommend getting into indie publishing, or would you say, really, what are you thinking? I mean, how much sleep do you need?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So when I started this, I had a whole business plan, and I went through business training, and I went through classes to evaluate cover art and all that stuff. So it actually took me about 2 years to ramp up while I kind of explored this really thoroughly and got things ready. And it's an enormous amount of work. I was originally hoping to make this my retirement gig. However, that was based on, 2017 socioeconomic and political conditions. So that's a lot less likely now than it was back then, which is sad. It's very challenging. It's not getting less challenging. It's something to kind of bear in mind as you're looking at it. How much time and energy do you want to put into this? I have a colleague who she puts out one novella a year, and that's it. And it's a great novella, and she just, puts all her energy into doing one good book per year. And I think that if you've got, limitations on, your energy, you've got kids, you're doing elder care, you're working full time, whatever else it is you're doing, depending on what kind of experience you're looking for, that's not a bad one. I know other folks who put out 6 or 7 titles a year, but they're usually doing it as that it's their full-time job. They're not doing something else in addition to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to get to work-life balance. There's, a lot of stuff that goes to it. On the fun side, it's really great to get books out there. So you think, watch authors be really excited about getting their book published and getting things, in the hands of readers. I do a thing where when an author's book has paid for the cost of production for that book, I get them a commemorative mug with their book cover on it.
That's awesome.
And, people love those.
I could see it. Let me throw one more in there, just because it's been, at the time that we're recording this, we are having another one of those challenging weeks. So there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's WhatsApp, there's Discord servers, there's Blue Sky,
Tumblr,
Mastodon, Instagram, TikTok. What would the social media conscious writer, is there a recommended path, or is it a feel your way, or have we all given up on Twitter? What are your thoughts?
Well, people are giving up on Twitter in droves. I locked our account and my personal account a while back, and I've, deleted most things out there. So Twitter is no longer viable, and it stopped being viable a while ago, which, I mean, it was a big hit. I don't want to, talk dismissively of it. It was, it was incredibly useful. I was very good at Twitter. We got a lot of, we got a lot of direct sales from Twitter. Very difficult to replace that. So I started establishing, when the man who shall not be mentioned bought Twitter, I started establishing outposts on some of the other social media. Facebook isn't all that useful because the algorithms have everything so locked, very little reach. But what Facebook is still very marginally useful for is the groups. So if you're in a couple of different groups, you can use those to promote and to get extra exposure to titles. So I keep it around for that, and my personal one for staying in touch with some people. I do have a TikTok. We have a Queen of Swords Press TikTok, and I go out once a week and dutifully make a new video. And most of them are slideshows with music, but sometimes I pop on and talk about things. And we've been kind of gradually inching upward, but since TikTok is always on the brink of being, outlawed or something, it's hard to invest too much in it.
Are there still kids using Tumblr? I heard Tumblr many episodes ago.
Yeah.
Tumblr, yeah.
Yeah, some of my authors use Tumblr. I've got Dreamwidth. I'm not going to expand into something that's that heavily text based.
Right.
Or, it's got the option for pictures as well, but it's one more platform to learn, and I don't feel like establishing a case there. So we mostly use Blue Sky. Moved out there pretty heavily. We do have a Discord, use it occasionally, usually for events. That's usually kind of a very specific thing. We have our own YouTube channel. So we have videos out there of presentations and author readings and so forth. I use Instagram. I don't use Threads. I just didn't feel the need to also take on Threads in addition to Instagram. So Instagram is somewhere where we have a pretty solid presence. So yeah, it usually mix things up and get things out in as many ways as possible. I'm lucky in that a couple of my authors are super interesting things. Dee Holloway, who's the author of Little Nothing, does like fabulous embroidery projects. So she'll do things where she'll like embroider pieces based on scenes from the book and stuff. It's very cool, and it makes for great Instagram images.
It is one of the things that I have come to like about many parts of social media is there are authors that are constantly, let me tell you about my book, buy my book, hey, I have a book. And they are very quickly become the ones that I sort of like, I'll connect with you, but I don't want to follow you. I want to follow the ones that have interesting hobbies and, they raise smelly goats or embroider things or, hey, I painted this ugly picture of a pickle, but it makes me happy. And
There's no such thing as an ugly picture of a pickle.
the pickle lover speaks. These are the sort of things that I like, at least because they help me feel like I might like to know this person and sit at a bar with them at a convention and tell stories to each other.
But
So
you do.
Yeah, I mean, you have to vary things, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't quite realize when they first get into promoting books, is that you've got to have some variation, and whether that's a different look or something that moves, or you're doing an interview, or you're doing, pictures of your cats with your books, whatever. But you got to shake things up, because you're right, people otherwise stop paying attention, and that's not so useful.
I'll buy anything John Scalzi wrote just because when I met him in person, I was like, oh my God, you write books too, because I literally had only ever followed his blog, which was fabulous. And he looked up at me with the most dumbfounded expression, yet, yes, I do. And I was with Carrie Vaughn and she laughed her ass off at me and pointed a little bit, but still, I didn't know. And hey, I'm that much more interested and invested because they have a life. I mean, we all follow George Takei. If he ever started writing novels, we would buy them because we're invested with George Takei.
Oh my, you should publish them.
Oh my. We would send him to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So here we are.
George, you heard us.
We're coming into Christmas. Any good Christmas plans? What are your hopes and dreams for Queen of Swords for 2025? Breathing, of course. Breathing is good.
From the perspective of, the week after, I would love to see us grow more. I have, a sales goal for every year, and I would love to just really blow past next year's and be doing well for our authors. I try to commit to doing a couple of new events each year, so we're always out getting to a new audience. So I'm hoping to line some things up there. I'm, beyond that, survival, I think, which is kind of what most of us are hoping for.
Are you going to Worldcon in Seattle in 2025? Are we going to go hang out in a bar?
Yes, we are. That's the plan.
The pact is sealed then. You and me in the bar.
My friend and I are going to take the train back over the mountain. That is on my bucket list. I want to go. I want to take a train over the Rockies. So
Starlight Express,
yeah.
I hear.
So that's the plan.
That'll be.
Yeah, I've heard that too. So.
And if you have the time, you should go down and catch a game at the Sports Bra.
The Sports Bra is.
Go down and do what?
There's a bar that opened, the Sports Bra, which for those people just listening that aren't aware, only shows women's sports on all the TV. And
we have one of those here. Fired somebody here to start a women's sports bar. So we have our own here in Minneapolis.
Of course you do in Minneapolis, because you guys,
it's been in Vogue and everything.
You've got the women's hockey team out there. And I think somebody just launched a women's sports network. So we can now just finally tune into a network and only see women's sports on it. And
yeah, I mean, we've got women's hockey, we've got women's soccer, we've got the Lynx.
Yeah, I bought my niece
Full
tickets to
team,
the women's hockey team
all
out
kinds of
there.
stuff.
I wish we would get one, but yeah, that for those of you thinking entrepreneurial things, you could be an independent publisher and run a women's sports bra. Because the woman who did the first one, she made $1 million in 9 months. So there is money in investing in women in the future.
And I think a bar of our own is what the local one is called.
That's
And
magnificent.
I was one of the original Kickstarter supporters for it because they could not get a small business loan for it. And now almost a year old, and like Billie Jean King has come in and signed their wall, and they've had Olympians and world champions coming in and hanging out and doing things. So I gather they're doing quite well, and somebody out in some small business administration office is just kicking themselves right now.
Boys' sports are so boring. It's like none of them are even married to each other. How do you know what their home life is going to be like if they're not beating each other up on the ice?
You're so hockey.
I am so hockey. Catherine, thank you so much for coming back. And I, for everybody, I got to meet Catherine finally in person this year, and there was a hug, and it was really meaningful for me. And I really loved meeting you.
Aw, that was delightful. I'm so glad we got to hang out.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on and talking about, because I really love the Queen of Swords Press, and I believe you should prosper. And at the very least, I mention hockey a lot because solidly half of my hockey girls would love to read the books that are out there. So I'm going to have to send them all links.
Please do. That'd be great.
We will put links to the fascinating things we discussed during this episode on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, which is a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spiders are David Welsh, John Schmidt, and Ksenia Chernievskia. Our intro and exit music is performed by Michael Engberg, who lives down under in Hervey Bay and runs Tin Can Music School. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs, The Beans Scene, Arm Street, and I've decided a bar of their own are secretly our sponsors, and they don't know it yet, but they're going to love us. And hey, thanks for listening.